This is Paranormal Skeptic Academy, using critical thinking and scientific reasoning to analyze your favorite ghost hunting shows. You will never look at them the same again. You have been warned.
Chad and John investigate the abandoned Springfield State Hospital, a former mental hospital that mistreated the mentally insane. The town sits on underground springs, which may be a conductor for all the paranormal activity on the complex, as well as forming a portal or doorway to another world. Chad goes on a solo investigation in the Warfield W buildings, which are allegedly the most haunted locations on the campus, a location where female patients were housed and alleged reports of screaming are heard. This is Paranormal Skeptic Academy. Before we get into the meat of this episode, I recently had a conversation with John Tenney about ghost stalkers and the paranormal in general. You should go back and listen to it if you haven't already done so. It was very eye-opening. Not only did we see into the mind of John, but also how these shows are filmed and edited. However, that doesn't mean I'll go easy on John or his show. I will still dissect and tear apart his and any other paranormal show. And like I told John, I can only go by what's put in front of me, and that will continue to be the focus of this podcast. My conversation with John came about when he commented on my site about Whispers Estate, episode 13. He didn't say much, and it opened up the door for us to speak voice to voice, and it was a great, eye-opening conversation, and it changed my mind about John, but not about his show. Van, the owner of Whispers Estate, also commented, and I appreciate him taking the time to do so. Van went on to claim that there were reported paranormal activity prior to when Jared bought the house. I mentioned in episode 13 that most of the paranormal activity started and stopped with Jarrett, but Van also said that locals have a known fear of the place, none of which was on the show nor on his website. He also said he spoke to most of the previous owners of the house about the paranormal activity. This is a quote from Van. Quote, "The earliest record I have of a reported paranormal incident in the house was late 1960, when the then owners, George and Linda Fox, owned/lived in the house, heard bangs/noises on the second floor. Soon after that, and upon hearing more weird noises within the house, and not something as subtle as old house creaks, did George seal off the second floor from his family. Linda confided in me in October 2010 at their house that George was afraid of something within the house, which is why they sealed off the second floor. She also said that if I asked George himself, he may simply state it was because it cost too much to heat/cool the upstairs. Quote, but he'd be lying, says Linda. Unquote. In the episode, I mentioned that Van was afraid to go into the basement, as was told on the show, but in the comments on my site, Van said he had to leave and head back to Indianapolis, and didn't have time to go into the basement. The show had to make the transition from him to Gwen, and that was how they made the transition. Now, I know a lot of editing goes into these shows to portray a narrative and story arc, but this is a direct contradiction to what actually happened to what was aired. Why the dishonesty? Van then says that since I haven't been there, it's hard for me to understand what actually goes on at the site. I beg to differ, because the point of these ghost hunting shows is to put the viewer in the position of the investigator, and the point of this podcast is to critically analyze these ghost hunting shows, and I can only go on by what is presented to me. Unlike most viewers of these shows, I'm actually taking a critical eye to them and calling out their nonsense. Who knows? One day, I may have the means and time to visit all these places, but not now. I appreciate the comments and the interaction, but even if John and Van are nice people, I will continue with my efforts of taking these shows apart and calling them on their BS. With that being said, We will now look at the second episode of Ghost Stalkers, Springfield State Hospital. The history of this hospital is pretty mundane. If you are a student of history, then you know the treatment of those suffering from mental illness hasn't always been the best. This place meets several ghost hunting criteria, as in 1, it's old, 2, people died there, and 3, it's partially abandoned. The state of Maryland still runs a hospital on this site. In the 1980s, Springfield consolidated the buildings into a smaller, more efficient campus. They left the older historical buildings intact, but provided no upkeep. With the presence of asbestos and other hazardous materials, cleanup and demolition is expensive. The following historical information is from asylumprojects.org. In 1894, the state of Maryland was looking for a site to erect a second hospital for the insane of Maryland. They settled on a chunk of land owned by the Patterson Brown family in Springfield. In 1896, the first patients arrived, but these first patients lived in old farmhouses while the building was being constructed. The first phase brought the men's group located in the northern section, and in 1900, the women's group, which is located in the southern section of the grounds, was completed. By the late 1940s, the grounds had expanded as well as the population, reaching and exceeding 3,000 patients. With overcrowding and understaffing, the hospital failed to meet the needs of the patients, and the patient care slipped. So much so that in 1949, the Baltimore Sun published a series of articles detailing these horrid conditions at several hospitals around the state, including Springfield. Public attention of these conditions led to reform and patient care improved. It was during this time the idea of foster care and placing discharged patients in family homes began, a model that was widely adopted across the state and country. With the advent of psychotropic drugs in the 1950s, most patients were able to return to their communities and live a somewhat normal life. This helped reduce the overcrowding problem, as fewer and fewer patients required inpatient treatment. The 1960s brought the idea of community-based treatment centers, which again lessened the need for inpatient treatment. In the 1970s, deinstitutionalization was introduced. The idea was to provide patients with skills needed to reintegrate back into their communities and into independent or assisted living arrangements. This further reduced the inpatient population, and as care became more concentrated, so did the grounds. New buildings were being built to replace the aging buildings, and the grounds were consolidated while these older buildings remained abandoned. One thing of interest is that there was a cemetery on the grounds that held patients that died between 1899 and 1961, but these grave sites were marked with small numbered stones, 908 of these stones. In 2012, the staff and volunteers finished 8 years of hard work to match each of these grave sites with an individual. They dug through dusty, often illegible records, cross-checking and verifying each stone, and they finally added the last name to an imposing granite and bronze stone dedicated to those that died. Osborne Broadwater. I don't know about you, but I find that very touching and heartwarming, that these people would dedicate 8 years of their lives to preserve the memory of these people and to honor them with a memorial, instead of making a mockery of their lives by listening for bumps in the night to justify belief in the paranormal. That is a brief history of the hospital that has been in service for 120 years. I'm sure the Ghost Stalkers will honor the memory and legacy of this hospital in a respectable manner.
I spent a lot of time in hospitals as a kid.
It's a tragic place here. Ow.
I really hope the cameras picked it up, because it was audible sound.
I just heard a voice. I just heard a woman's voice. There's something in this place that knows exactly how to press my button.
You have so much supernatural activity.
The show starts with Chad and John driving up to the site, and John says it seems like the whole town of Sykesville is infested with paranormal activity. John does a voiceover introducing us to the site, which is Springfield State Hospital. Listen to how John describes the site.
Smack dab in the middle of this haunted town lies the unexplored ruins of one of America's most notorious insane asylums, Springfield State Hospital. In 1896, the hospital's Warfield complex for women opened its doors to much fanfare, representing the best in modern psychiatric care. In reality, the complex became a dumping ground for Maryland's unwanted mentally ill women. Many of them received barbaric treatment by today's standards, often physically assaulted and inhumanely neglected. By the 1980s, after years of patient abuse, reforms in mental health policy forced the Warfield complex to shutter completely.
They are going to focus on the woman's complex, also known as the Warfield complex. Compare how John described the place to how I did. Context matters, and the context for John is paranormal. Everything gets the paranormal rub. Even the very town is infested with the paranormal. Were patients abused in this hospital? Yes. Was early psychiatric care primitive to modern standards? Yes. Is John's timeline of the hospital correct? No. Reform happened in the 1940s, not the 1980s, after the Baltimore Sun published its articles. The 1980s marked the consolidation of the massive campus. As a matter of fact, by this point, the hospital was used as a model for modern psychiatric care for hospitals all over the country. I'm sure there are researchers for these shows, and I find it hard to believe they couldn't find the same information I found. I guess for dramatic effect, you don't want to ruin your ominous overtones with positive comments. They even failed to mention the fact that there is still a working hospital at the site. John goes on to say the reason they are focusing on the hospital is because of its checkered past, and Chad pipes in and says, "Forgotten souls." Again, I already mentioned the fact that staff and volunteers spent 8 years identifying the graves of those that died during their stay at the hospital. They even have a huge stone and bronze memorial with all the names listed of those that died. Forgotten souls? Hardly. A lot of people spend a lot of time to make sure these people weren't forgotten. And of course, the whole point of this show is finding portals, and apparently there are 3 elements needed to make a portal to the other world. Chad explains.
It's our belief that the Warfield complex, with its dark and sordid history, coupled with the fact that it sits next to a power plant, train tracks, and a river, could be hiding a portal, as these factors are all believed to amp up paranormal activity.
Train tracks, power plant, and a river hype up paranormal activity. Everyone have that in their notes because this will be on the test. John goes on to explain that this site is perfectly suited for a vortex because of the factors I just mentioned. And remember, John is a skeptic and non-believer, or so he says. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a Ghost Stalker show without bringing in local experts. Sorry. I meant paranormal investigators. Don't want to confuse the two.
What have I heard about Springfield State Hospital? There are quite a few rumors about this place being haunted.
A lot of people don't mention it much because they're afraid of it.
When you have places with dark emotion, restless spirits are the things that you think about.
You had a lot of mentally unstable patients. You probably actually had some criminally insane patients here. Add that to neglect and abuse. A lot of people dying here. They may have been buried in unmarked or mass graves. So it's quite possible that that spirit is still looking for recognition.
Most people that died here, they had nobody. Being alone is a very, very dreadful feeling. So you have lost spirits.
I work for the town of Sykesville in the Public Works Department. I had to board a door up, and then when I looked in it to see if anybody was in there, this energy had hit the door, and it actually made me take a step back because it felt like all these eyes were looking at me. That's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me.
Okay, nothing really new here. The same old song and dance you hear with most any site that is alleged to be haunted. Chad and John drive home the fact that no one, until them, has investigated this place before. They finally arrive at the site and meet up with Ivy Wells. Director of Economic Development for the town of Sykesville. She goes on to say that her job is to get businesses to try and develop the land, but it hasn't been easy. She seems to equate this difficulty with the sordid past of this place. Now, would you believe that what she is saying just doesn't fit the evidence I found? The 51-acre Warfield complex was deeded to the town in 2001, and since then the town has been trying to find the appropriate redevelopment plan for the site. The town was looking for a developer to create a mixed-use development consisting of commercial, residential, and retail space. As of 2013, the current offer from a developer was $5 million. $1 million going to the town, and $4 million to pay off the $6 million in debt occurred by the town to maintain the property, and the current zoning of the site is not suitable for what they plan to do. So it's not a sordid past that is keeping people from developing the land, but money and bureaucratic red tape. As of August 2014, the town is still working through the rezoning process. But please continue on with your spooky story, Miss Wells. So Ivy says she has never entered the building and does so for the first time with John and Chad. We get a walkthrough of the building and John does a voiceover telling us how bad it was to be a patient at the hospital in its early years. And then he gets into some sweet, sweet portal talk.
We talk about openings and portals and vortices. Part of my mission is to figure out when portals open, where they're forming, why they're forming, and where do they lead to.
If spirits and other entities are entering this world using a portal at the Warfield complex, they may also have another passageway to get from building to building.
There's been reports that there are steam tunnels that run underground that connect this building with some of the other buildings. I've heard that there are some bars and solitary confinement type things down there. One of the maintenance workers said that he heard screams from underneath.
Wow.
Well, the mention of steam tunnels piques my interest. The water carried in these tunnels would have had a negative ionic charge that, when combined with the positive ions conducted by the nearby power plant, could have created a perfect storm of conditions ripe for portal formation.
Oh boy. Okay, let's start with this portal nonsense first. If there is a portal here, and John already appears to assume one is, what happens to it when the site gets demolished and redeveloped? Does it get destroyed? Should we try to preserve these portals, mark them as historical landmarks? And is he also assuming some dark energy influenced the horrible treatment of the patients at the hospital? That this bad energy caused staff to abuse patients? What is the assumption here? Next, we have another gem to unpack. John thinks the water running through the steam vents has a negative ionic charge, and this steam mixed with the positive ionic charge of the power plant, thus creating portals. So let's start with the basics here. A normal atom has a neutral charge with an equal number of positive and negative particles. Ions are atoms with extra or missing electrons. If you are missing an electron, you have a positive charge. If you have an extra electron, you have a negative charge. Positive ions are attracted to negative ions. So far, so good. John claims the water in the steam pipes were negatively charged, meaning they had an extra electron. However, H2O is a neutral molecule. H2O is also a polar molecule, having a pair of equal and opposite charges. So depending on the conducting source, water will be pulled either by the positive or negative electron. Electricity works the same way. It's the movement of electrons from one atom to another, from positive to negative, that create electricity. What any of this has to do with vortexes is beyond me. When you search for negative and positive ions together, you get a lot of pseudoscience BS about its health benefits on the body, that if you wear a special negatively charged ionic bracelet for $9.99, but if you act now, we'll throw in a second bracelet for free. Just pay separate shipping and handling. But apparently this combination is important for vortexes, but he never explains why. The tour continues as they make their way to the Warfield building, alleged to be the most haunted building on the campus. And right on cue, Ivy starts to get an uneasy feeling.
It's possible that right before our eyes, the spirit of a former patient is preying on Ivy's nerves. Maybe it's the same spirit whose screams could be heard by workers and the same one who's behind the W building's storied activity.
It could be all that, or it could be a low blood sugar, a sudden drop in blood pressure, bad Chinese. Or she could be influenced by John and Chad's presence and her own beliefs and that these symptoms are simply psychosomatic. John tries to comfort her by saying these misguided energies could have been absorbed into the walls of the place, or they could be, wait for it, traveling between worlds using a portex.
One of the things that I'm not sure that you also realize is that this property and basically all of Sykesville sit on top of underground springs. We are located on the Patapsco River. Certain parts of this campus are always wet.
These places that generate strange occurrences where we think there are portals forming, you have a ton of water in this area, running water and rivers everywhere. You have these channels for energy to move. Moving water has long been thought to be a source of paranormal phenomena throughout the world, with places like the Bermuda Triangle documented to have vortices and portals where ships, planes, and even people are believed to have disappeared into wormholes or other dimensions.
Oh my God. Is he doing this to me on purpose? I mean, really? Is he trying to make it that easy? Water equals portal because Bermuda Triangle? Energy equals water equals portals equals paranormal. So much nonsense in a 40-second clip brain. Hurting eyes. Watering portal. Forming. Paranormal ticking over. Negative ions collecting ears. Ringing cold. So very cold. Okay, I'm back. That was a close one. In my interview with John, he did say his voiceovers are heavily edited. I'm still not entirely convinced that he doesn't believe some of this nonsense, though. Moving on, Ivy takes him to the cemetery, and here we find out about the 908 bodies that are buried there. Remember what I said about the 8 years needed to identify these bodies? Well, listen to what they have to say about it.
Another possible factor may lie a few hundred yards away, where the hospital's darkest secrets were discarded.
Where we're standing right now is where people were buried and no one knew who they were, and there were 908 of them and they were exhumed.
You have these people who are kind of nameless, just put in the ground here, and even though their bodies are moved, you have people who were forgotten about, and for decades lay here unrecognized. And did that loneliness, did that sadness and torment kind of permeate the environment around here?
Maybe that's why they come back, is because they're not at peace, they're not at rest.
Emotional manipulation, pure and simple. Chad takes time to reflect on his own experience in a hospital and his brush with death. They finally lose Ivy and they head to the steam tunnels to try to figure out why a portal would be forming at this site. They find the entrance of the tunnels and remove the heavy steel cover and prepare to enter. We cut to a commercial break. Wait, this is the first commercial break? This is going to take forever. Things I do for y'all. They are in the tunnels and revel at how big and long they are. Insert sexual innuendo here. They notice some rooms with bars on the windows and question why such bars would be there. Indeed. John makes the connection to the underground spring in his portex theory.
It's also possible that the trauma of the patients who were kept here, and might have even died here, could have seeped into the steam tunnels and into the underground springs, infecting the entire hospital and maybe even the town with negative energy.
Sure, that sounds like a possibility. Or, now just hear me out here, it's just utter and complete nonsense. Take your pick. Up next, a return guest from last episode. Dr. David Roundtree arrives. I'm not sure he's a real doctor. Remember, he is the guy that built the wormhole detector from last episode. John and Chad let David know about the steam tunnels and the underground springs, and David is excited because of all this natural source of energy permeating from under the building. I guess that's important. They talk about the W building and why it's active, then David comes up with an idea on how to recognize a portex opening.
David has come up with an idea to allow us to better visualize if a portal opening is occurring here.
And we've got a couple of high-powered lasers over here. We're going to bombard the room with laser beams and create a grid. And then additionally, we're going to add some smoke into it. let the smoke settle, and we're going to look for movement in the smoke, phantom movement, which is associated with portal formation. One of the things we want to do is try to document that. We've checked the building, we've sealed it up here. There's like no wind drafts. So if something walks through here, we'll be able to see it in the laser grid, and we'll see disturbances in the smoke as well.
Does that mean that there's portal activity?
That is a good sign that we have portal formation.
The stuff these guys come up with is fascinating, and I'm pretty sure they did it while high. I want to know the mechanism that allows this to be true. What scientific theory posits that vortexes can be detected by lasers and smoke? Really, what is your proof for this? The guys set up their contraption, which is essentially a light show of hundreds of green laser pointers. They create this curtain of laser points displayed on the side of the room. Their stated mission? Watch for one of these tiny lights to flicker in and out. I kid you not, there was probably 500 to 1,000 laser lights, and they want to watch for one to flicker in and out. Not to mention they are pumping smoke into the room, because smoke, it won't distort the light, no. You can see right through smoke, crystal clear. David unleashes the smoke and it fills the room. Now, not only do we see the point of the laser, but the actual beams. Chad posits that this setup allows them to detect any size entity that may try to come through the portal. So we have Chad, John, and David standing around a dark room full of smoke, looking at thousands of laser lights and waiting for one to flicker. Now tell me they didn't come up with this high. I dare you to. John, just to make sure to cover his ass, says that since this is a portal opening, they may not see a full apparition or a continuous movement. Instead, entities could be popping in and out, so what they need to look for is a blocking of photons or a blocking of matter, or flickering lights. What's the chances they will see one of these lasers flicker in a room full of smoke? Chad starts to not feel well, to sell the audience on the idea that this room in particular is different, because this room has the vortex in it, just like in the last episode when Chad did the same thing. I see a pattern developing here. John says that there is a human component to vortexes, and then something stings or burns or bumps or scratches Chad. I'm not sure.
I feel like this room is just using my body as a Raggedy Ann doll.
We know from the stuff that we learned, like there's a human component to the portals.
Absolutely.
My body is just all over the map, and I feel like, ow.
You all right?
Yeah, I just felt like a hot burn on my back.
Uh-oh.
I definitely felt something, man. It was like hot. It was just a hot
Is this
burn.
area it?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a mark there. It didn't break the skin, but it's definitely a mild abrasion.
Since you got up.
So since I got up here, I've been feeling weird and just like aggro and dizzy and like just like I have to get out of here and sweaty. And then all of a sudden it was just like this like energy. It was just like mounting in me, and then that's when I felt the sort of like the hot needle go into my back. And then it went into even more. It was like I felt it, and then it really went for it. That was intense. That was really intense. No, I think now is the perfect time to do what we do.
Chad jumps around like the House of Pain, and they have him pull up his shirt, and they notice two small scratch marks, almost like a zigzag pattern. One going about an inch from the top left to the bottom right, the other just below going from the top right to the bottom left. Just before this happened, Chad was squatting down against a pillar, and then he jumps up and starts rubbing at his back. When they lift his shirt, they see the marks but fail to see the big splotchy red mark just below it. Why didn't they focus on that mild skin irritation? When I was speaking with John, he mentioned that stress can cause skin to become irritated and show marks, and what would appear to be scratches, but if the marks go away the next day, scratches they are not. John said they discussed this possibility, but it didn't make it into the episode. Chad finally settles down and the investigation begins. Since Chad is still shaken up from Scratchgate, John goes first. They go over the camera setup and the buildings they're going to investigate and mention the only building unlocked is the main building. If they want to access other buildings, they will have to use the steam tunnel. Dum dum dum. Oh yeah, don't forget they have their laser grid set up as well. John heads to the main building to start his investigation. The tension builds as John finally enters and reiterates the fact that former secretaries have heard strange noises. And then would you guess it? John hears a strange noise.
Is there anybody in here with me? My name's John. Did you just tap up there for me? Hold on. Let me come up and say hello. My camera also catches the unexplained sound I've just heard. Here's the enhanced audio.
What I find interesting about this clip is that when John is speaking, we hear two thumps. And it's clearly him walking up the steps. But he hears the same thump again, but this one catches his attention, even though it sounds exactly like the first two from him walking up the steps. Why is this one different? He makes his way upstairs and looks around some more. John's approach to investigating is to be non-confrontational, polite almost. It's almost as if he's talking to a child. Then John taps on the counter and instructs whatever is there to tap on it gently, just as he has done. And as he is doing his own tapping, right as he moves his hand up, there is a faint clicking sound.
Once again, my camera captures the sound of unexplained tapping. Could it be the spirit of the patient who was locked away in the steam tunnels below? Just gentle. Just gentle.
No, not a spirit from the steam tunnels. It sounded like a static click in the audio, a random noise picked up or made from the recording equipment. John then knocks to show the entity what to do, and we cut to Chad talking about loss and pain and despair. We never hear the entity do the tap like John instructed. We cut back to John as he heads down to the steam tunnels. It's dark and creepy, and I bet he feels a little creeped out. Who wouldn't? Then he goes on to tell us again why water is conducive to the paranormal in poor Texas.
It's here below the W building where all of the steam tunnels converge. They once flowed with water and water vapor that would have caused a negative ionic charge that, when combined with the other energies generated by the neighboring power plant, could have created a portal that is still active today.
Yada yada yada, same old nonsense, but surprisingly no major incident in the steam tunnel. John emerges into another building, the W building, the most haunted building in the entire complex. He feels a sense of abandonment and seems to be overwhelmed with what is before him. He heads up to the third floor where the laser grid is set up. Then, the camera goes out.
When the check-in camera in the W building mysteriously turns off without him knowing. There should be no reason why this battery is drained right now. I can't hear him, I can't see him.
No reason for the camera to go out? No reason at all, Chad? Dead battery, loss of signal, equipment malfunction? Are any of these reasons? John continues, not knowing his friend cannot see him. John makes sure to remind us once again about the steam tunnels 4 floors down and the negative ionic energy. He starts asking questions to the darkness, and then he hears another noise.
I was about to attempt an EVP session when I was cut short by an unexplained sound.
A distant noise in an old building? Must be the paranormal, because right before we heard that noise, John said something. Therefore, paranormal. John goes looking for the source of the sound, and we cut to Chad, and he's still pissed he can't see John. Not finding the source of the sound, John makes his way back to the laser room to conduct an EVP session, and we hear another noise.
My handheld camera clearly captures a disembodied moan. Could it be the tormented spirit of a patient once confined to a cell in the steam tunnels? Or is it the energy from another being manifesting through the portal right here and now?
Or it could be the wind, or a dog howling, or a train because they are near a train track. Or it could be an interdimensional being. He hears the moan again, and now I'm convinced that it was a train. John then rushes downstairs to find the source of the noise, but it has stopped. Maybe because the train has passed. Morning dawns and his investigation is over. John sits down with Chad and recounts his experience.
The energy here is definitely weird, and it's definitely multifaceted.
What do you think? Do you think that there's a portal here?
The W building is the main source. It seems to be where the portal is. It's all kind of spiraling out from this W building.
John is convinced there is a portal there after just one night of investigations. Rigorous scientific investigation going on here, folks. Next up, Chad. Again, Chad is a little apprehensive about going at it alone, but he has his panic button at the ready. He enters the main building and starts his investigation by talking to himself in the dark. Chad is sweating and assumes whatever is there is messing with his body temperature. You see, this is what pisses me off about these guys. It's hot and stuffy there. You are going to sweat. But he makes a connection between sweating and whatever he thinks is there. Complete nonsense. He then asked the entity for directions to the vortex, and then something tickled his back. In typical Chad fashion, he freaks the out. He then replays his voice recorder.
My name is Chad. What's that? My name is Chad. Something keeps tugging on the back of my shirt. Feel cold blast now. And I'm hot. I'm hearing noises.
Screamin' Nancy, as Lou from Geeks and Ghosts called him, jumps around like his feet are on fire and rambles about sweating, cold blasts, and something grabbing his shirt. And would you believe it? He hears thumping, the same that John heard. It is clearly audible and it did happen, but what's an alternative explanation? A crew member? Are we sure the building is completely locked down? A homeless person? Any of these are possibilities before the paranormal is. Chad then heads to the W building via the steam tunnels, and when he reaches the W building, he conducts an EVP session, asking where the vortexes are. He then asks the meaning of life. Really? The meaning of life? Why would a ghost know that? Chad then replays his EVP session.
What is that? Are they upstairs? What is that?
My recorder clearly captures an unexplainable voice, but I can't make out what it's saying.
What is that? What is that?
The W building is considered the most haunted on the women's campus. I've only been here a few minutes, and the rumors are already proving true.
I don't know, Chad. What was that? Maybe you breathing? Just a wild guess. He then heads upstairs to the laser room and the check-in camera, and then this happens.
I just heard a woman's voice. Okay, I heard you. I heard you. Okay. I just heard what sounded like a disembodied female voice. Oh, that scared me so bad. Okay. Ah, God.
My cameras also catch what sounds like a woman laughing. I wonder if it could be the voice of a deranged spirit, once locked away in a confinement cell, hidden deep beneath the hospital. If this is a forgotten spirit, did she use a portal to return to the W building?
The only deranged spirit here is you, Chad. You are making so much damn noise, it's hard to tell what is coming from you or the crazy lady. Or maybe you're one and the same. He makes it up to the 3rd floor with the laser grid, and Chad gets goosebumps. Funny thing here, why didn't Chad and John talk about the camera shutting off? That should have been an important piece of evidence, so it just must have been an equipment malfunction. Chad is getting close to wrapping up his investigation, but he's feeling uneasy about being in the vortex room with the laser light show. He blathers on about portals and passageways and other realms. Then he feels uneasy again and he thanks whatever is there for being there and makes sure to tip your waitresses on the way out. Chad then hears the same moan as John right around the same time.
I just heard a disembodied moan.
My cameras also captured the moan. I can't help but wonder, is this the same lost spirit who was on the stairs with me? Or the one who scratched me in the room yesterday? If there is a portal in this room, maybe my energy is affecting it.
My battery is almost dead. I walked in with a full battery. It's about 2 minutes left. It's used up all the energy from the battery. Maybe that's why I was hearing the voices.
Now I'm even more convinced that it was a train. You see, this is the difference between skeptics and believers. As a skeptic, I think, what else could it be? They said there were train tracks near the site, so trains travel on those tracks. You hear the same moan as the night before. Maybe there is a train that runs on that track at the same time on a nightly basis. Now let's go find out. The believer says it's a disembodied moan of some spirit and moves on. Next, Chad notices his camera battery is draining. It was fully charged. Why would it drain? I've been using it for a few hours. I can't understand why it would drain. Must be a ghost. Then the sound from the static camera drops out and Chad shows John the dead camera. He then heads downstairs, but the check-in camera is still running. And we catch something truly remarkable.
Just moments after Chad leaves, the check-in camera captures something remarkable.
Now, I apologize to the audio listeners, but let me describe what was going on. We are shown footage from the check-in camera of the laser room. We watch closely for movement, and in the middle of the shot, we see a slight rounded distortion of the laser light. It's like a quarter of a softball coming just under one of the lights and then moving to the left a few frames and then it's gone. So what was it? I don't know, but I can only guess. None of the other lasers were disturbed when it moved through the shot. It looked like someone ducking and walking under the laser and their head popped up a little. In every one of these episodes, there will be something you can't explain. And this is one of those. But it's a far leap from not being able to explain something to endorsing the Portex hypothesis. Chad ends his investigation and he sits down with John to describe his experience.
That place is crazy.
Yeah. You look like you've been in a fist fight. I don't know if it's just you being through that experience, but I mean, you're not really even you right now. You just need to calm down.
I just feel like something inside of that building is just up on me all the time, and it creates this mountain of energy inside of me. There's something in this place that knows exactly how to press my button and keep me on that emotional brink.
Do you think there's a portal somewhere here?
Without a doubt, in the W building. Just everything that I have experienced, it terrified me. It terrified me.
Imagine that. The place they assumed the portal was in from the beginning is where it still is after the investigation. What would impress me would be saying, we thought it was here, but it turns out it was over there. But I'm not holding my breath on that one. John and Chad then go over their evidence.
Okay, I want to show you something. So when I was in the 3rd floor of the W building, I'm getting all of these moans. I leave. Okay, about a minute after I leave, this is what happens. See it?
Yeah.
One more time. Right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, it's strange, right? Like, I can't tell if it like manifests and then like moves across. The way it just kind of appears, like something pops in and then it's gone.
Right.
Did it pop into reality through a portal and then pop back out? Where did it go?
It's pretty awesome.
It's crazy.
And it's scary to think that, like, this thing was in there when I was in there alone.
Right.
And it seems to me that the people that died here, people that passed on, all are moving through these portals in these buildings, going from one building to the next, maybe using the tunnels to even act as a subway.
Absolutely. And it seems like the center point is the W building. It's just creating this perfect entry and exit point for all of the people that have passed away here.
It's like the eye of the storm.
Yeah, for sure. The environmental factors just are off the scale. The river, the springs, and then with the emotional and kind of psychic scars, it just really does seem to be like this place and the W building on the 3rd floor are the access points that spirits are using to get back into this reality.
Let's get out of here.
Even after speaking with John, I still can't help but feel he believes some of this nonsense. I don't hold it against him, and I believe he is genuine, but I also feel like he is playing both sides of the field here. I think he is skeptical and doesn't really believe in ghosts, but I also think, deep down, he believes some of this stuff. The theme of portals is something that is going to run through all these episodes, so I'm not surprised they popped up here again. Did we get concrete evidence of something happening? No. But I don't expect to in these shows. Do we get sound science? Hardly. John said this show is about the psychological experience of doing these investigations. He says they are alone during these investigations and opted for a minimalist approach. I respect that. The way ghost hunters use technology infuriates me to no end. Overall, the episode didn't really prove much, and most of the episode was about explaining, or at least trying to, John's portal theory. If John uses this show cynically to get people to his talks and then lays the skeptical smackdown, I can get behind that, but I guess I'll have to hear one of his talks first. But until then, Ghost Stalkers is just another ghost hunting show. And like the rest of them, it fails to deliver on the evidence. This has been Paranormal Skeptic Academy. If you like what I do, head on over to patreon.com/PSA, and for as little as $2 an episode, you can help support my efforts. Each patron will receive the video version of the normal episodes, along with a special RSS feed to add to your favorite podcatcher. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at cweb619. Send me feedback at paranormalskepticacademy@gmail.com. Like the Facebook page, and leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher. This has been Paranormal Skeptic Academy, schooling your favorite ghost hunters.